Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the webinar. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Erica from University Tunku Abdul Rahman, Division of Program Promotions. The webinar today is conjunction with the Utah Cyber Open Day. For information, Utah Cyber Open Day will be launched until 4th of July. Every day we'll be having video chat and live chat from 9 to 5 p.m. Okay, so the topic of today is psychology. Why study common sense, right? So our Facebook page, Utah for You, is the main platform for today's webinar. So if you have any questions, you can just drop us a message in below the video, the live video. And also we do have the live streaming through the Cyber Open Day platform, openday.utah.edu.my. You can just go to our Cyber Open Day to check upcoming webinars. All right. Okay. So today we are glad to have Miss Lee from Faculty of Arts and Social Science, Department of Psychology and Counseling, to conduct the webinar today. So without further ado, let's welcome Miss Lee to share the topic to begin the webinar. Thank you.
Hi everyone, thank you so much Erica for the introduction, and I believe you can see the screen now. Right, so today we're going to look at psychology. Why study common sense? Maybe you are one of the school leavers, you have finished your SPM and you're wondering what to do next in life. And so you think about it, you ask around, and perhaps you have asked your family members, should I study psychology? And maybe your dad, your mom, your grandparents, and different people start to tell you, why do you want to study common sense? Isn't that, something that everyone knows? You don't need to study that. What can you do after you do a psychology? And so today I would like to bring you through some myths in psychology. What myths of psychology? What is psychology? And then the career path of in psychology. Now here, let's take a look. Psychology is just common sense. Is it? Psychology isn't real science. Psychologists get paid to listen. What do you think about these? So let's look at them one by one. Psychology is just common sense. Is it? Let's take a look at this. Violent offenders usually have a diagnosis of mental illness. Yeah, it really makes sense, doesn't it? I mean, if they are being violent, maybe there's something wrong up here. But did you know that research has shown that 90% of people with mental illness do not commit violent acts? In fact, there's an overwhelming majority of violent offenders who are not mentally ill. So you see, it looks like this is common knowledge, this is common sense. But when we do a research, we gather data, we investigate, the result is opposite. So perhaps there's something more to it. Psychology is not just common sense. Now let's take a look at the second one. Talking about your problems will always be helpful. Yeah, perhaps. I mean, when we talk about our problems, we express ourselves, certainly we would feel better. It's supposed to help, isn't it? That's why they go to counselors. That's why they look for their friends and talk about it. Yeah, it makes sense. But not all the time. If you talk about your problems, it will always be helpful. In certain situations, research has shown otherwise. So there are some people, researchers, they have gone to investigate further and check out whether it is true. So they found that in certain situations, talking about problems will backfire. There was a meta-analysis of all published trials on critical incident stress debriefing. So this is the situation where perhaps people have gone through a traumatic event and they were sent for group counseling to talk about what has happened. So in this situation, the researchers found that it was not helpful to talk about the problems. In fact, it backfired. It did not benefit the participants at all. And in fact, other studies, they link that, when you do such treatment, the outcome is worse. So on the surface, we look at it, talking about your problems will always be helpful, perfect sense. But if you investigate further, in certain situations, it's not. Okay, let's look at another situation. Think about this. What do you think? Is this a myth? Is this true? People will not deliver potentially fatal electrical shocks to a stranger just because an authority figure told them to do so. Who will do that anyway? Correct? I mean, if you were asked to hurt another person by someone else, definitely not. Definitely you will not do that. But there was an experiment done in 1963. It's called the obedience experiment. And they found that people would actually do this. So they did an experiment whereby the researchers said, come, let's do a study on memory and learning. So they set up one of the students who are actually working together with the researcher, and they invited members of the community who are willing to partake as a participant of the study. So they were told, okay, we are going to investigate and study memory and learning, and I need you to be the teacher. Okay, so you go into this room and then you will listen to my orders and follow accordingly. So the thing is, this teaching method was not the conventional way. Okay, what the participant would do is that when you listen to what your researcher tells you, you have to do it. And that is when the stress level, the shocks will go higher. In other words, what they actually did is you listen and then you will press a button and it will send electrical shock signals to the learner. But the learner actually was just pretending to show that they were being hurt. So this continued, so as the experiment goes on, they answer right, then electric shock was given. And again until it goes higher and higher and higher. But what happened next? Did people stop? Did the participants stop? No, they did not. In fact, 65% continued to give potentially fatal electric shock to a stranger. Why? Just because the researcher told them to do so. So this results of the study showed that people will behave in such a way which might be totally opposite of what we think is common sense. Well, be rest assured, okay, we don't do this type of research anymore, okay? And since this research, we have come up with some ethical guidelines so that there will be no harm caused to the participant and also those who participate in the study. Okay, but in short, I would like to say, you look at all these myths, you look at all this seemingly common sense, right? You look at it, but when you do further research, it shows the opposite. So just because something seems like it is true, it does not necessarily mean that it is true. So psychology is not just common sense. Psychology has something more than that. So here comes to the second myth. Psychology, is it really science? I mean, what is it? Is it just somebody's opinion? Is it somebody's idea and theory? Well, let's first look at what science is. So science has some key characteristics. So when we say scientific studies, we say that, well, when you do a research, you have a hypothesis and you test it, right? And then you allow researchers to also predict future occurrences, meaning that what you have investigated now, it can be predicted again. Okay, and it's objective. It's not based on feelings, but it's very clearly very objective. In science, we have controllable and manipulative variables. You control the situation as you do experiments so that you know exactly which factor you are examining. Next, results can be replicated. It's not just one incident, okay, but you can repeat the experiment, you can repeat the research, and it would provide the same answer. Okay, and last, science use empirical methods. And empirical means that it's based on verifiable observations rather than just theory or pure logic. In other words, there is evidence. So this is science. The process of thinking, asking questions and finding answers, this is the scientific method. And now what is psychology? So psychology is a scientific study of behavior and mental processes. We use all those characteristics to study, but we study people. Okay, we study people's behavior. Behavior refers to what you can observe from the outward. Okay, the outward and overt actions and reactions. And then it's followed, we also study the mental processes of people. How do people think? What do they think? How do they process information? So mental processes refers to that internal covert activity of our minds. So this is what psychology studies. It is a scientific study. So psychology is science. It is science. So psychology is like you use new ways to look at and interpret your world and the people who inhabit it. So psychology, we want to understand people. Now let's move on. Okay, psychologists get paid to listen. Is that true? Yes, psychologists get paid. Definitely, they get paid, but they are paid only to listen? No, they don't just they don't just listen. They have so many different skills that they use to help people. And in fact, there are not just one type of psychologist. Perhaps you look at this picture here. Okay, in this picture here, you will say, oh yeah, this is a psychologist or this is a counselor because they're dealing with people. Yes, this is one of the more popular kind of psychology. Okay, the counseling, clinical psychologist, you probably heard of this before. Okay, but there are so many more than just counselors and just clinical psychologists. And so I would like to share with you a little bit more on what are the different types of psychologists there are. So bear in mind this myth here. Psychologists get paid to listen? No, they do get paid, but they do more than listening. So let's take a look. So we have counseling psychologists. Yeah, counseling psychologists, what do they do? Okay, they listen to people's problems. Yes, that's true. They also provide psychotherapy. So psychotherapy involves different skill sets, involves knowledge, involves different skills to help people. And what type of people do they help? They help those who experience psychological disturbances, or maybe some behavioral problems, emotional difficulties, stress. In other words, counseling psychologists, or sometimes we just call them counselors, they deal with people who face developmental issues. They help people to understand more about themselves. They teach people how to cope in life. They don't really resolve or solve people's problems, but they are there to guide. So they bring their clients along in a journey to discover themselves. They bring the clients along to help make good decisions according to the client. Okay, so it's like helping them to think through their issues, think through their problems, and to listen without judgment, to be there for them, to grant them the support and make support, connect them to other support systems that is needed. So counselors play this role. I think very often, and this is this is so much more popular when you hear psychology or when it deals with people. It's because normally we would see that if people have problems, then go and see a counselor. Okay, so this is what counselors do. This is what clinical psychologists focus on. They help people with a variety of issues. So it's all developmental concerns, okay, like maybe marriage, relationships, family issues, academic stress, emotional issues, substance abuse. Okay, so counselors, this is what counselors do. This is where they focus. They understand what people go through, and they are there with a skill set, knowledge to help them overcome. Okay, next you have clinical psychologists. Clinical psychologists, they differ a little bit from the counselors. In what sense? Well, clinical psychologists does assessment, and they do diagnosis and provide treatment for individuals who are experiencing psychological distress and mental illness. The main difference is counselors deal with developmental problems. Clinical psychologists, they deal with more severe mental illness like schizophrenia, severe depression, bipolar personality disorders. So it's when people come to a point where their behavior and their thought patterns are not so normal, or it has affected their life significantly, that they really feel like they are not able to cope very much and they need extra help. So what a clinical psychologist does is when clients come, they will make an assessment to see what kind of situation, what condition the clients are in, not just behaviorally, but also mentally and emotionally. And then from the assessment, they make a diagnosis. What is the mental illness that they are facing, or what is the mental health concern? And from that diagnosis, they have a treatment plan. Okay, so clinical psychologist deals with more severe mental health issues. Counselors deal with the developmental issues. So if a person has a problem, usually, if it's not so severe, we will see the counselor. And if it comes to a point where it's getting worse, or maybe it's beyond the counselor, then most of the time it is recommendable to refer to a clinical psychologist for further diagnosis. Yeah, so these two probably are the career jobs that you have heard about. But please bear in mind that psychologists are not limited to these two. Therefore, the myth before this, we were saying that, well, psychologists are paid to listen. Yes, these two job roles, they tend to do more listening to understand the client's issue, but that is not just it. Okay, you have other types of psychologists. So you have developmental psychologists, and their main focus is on human development. How do people develop? How do they, in the whole lifespan, since birth, conception, birth, babies, toddler, and then they go to early childhood. How do they develop emotionally, socially, psychologically? And then when they become teenagers, what goes on? What are some of the issues that may come up? How do people grow and develop and change throughout the whole lifespan? And they also look at aging, right? When people are getting older, how does the physical health affect the mental health? How does it affect the social life? Okay, so developmental psychologists mainly focus on these. They will do research about this. They will, and research can be done in so many ways, whether it is quantitatively, which is like through surveys, Or it could also be qualitative, where they actually do observations, they do interviews. But basically, this psychologists, developmental psychologists, they focus on understanding human development, how they develop from the different aspects, mentally, psychologically, socially, emotionally, physically. They also focus on evaluating children with developmental delay and disability. So it's not just the normal expected development, but in situations where development might be delayed. Because they have done studies across perhaps different people group, they will see what is the norm. And then you can understand a little bit more. Okay, if these children, they have some developmental delay, what's going on? Or children with disability, how do they develop? Is the development the same? What are some of the extra support that they need? Okay, so this is some of the specialties of developmental psychologists. In short, developmental psychologist really focuses on that development of people. Now, let's look at the next psychologist. We have educational psychologists, and what do? They study how people learn. They study how people process information, how they understand subject matters, and how the whole educational process. So how people learn, they might study children, how do they learn? Or maybe adults, maybe those with special needs. Yeah, and not only studying them, but they also develop instructional strategies and teaching techniques. So they know what might be the better way of teaching children, or a better way to teach teenagers or young adults. So they develop maybe teaching curriculums, strategies, techniques. Yeah, because they have done research, they focus on this, they become the expert. They also study giftedness or learning disabilities. So giftedness, okay, we look at the norm, okay, how people learn, and then they also study those who are a bit more exceptional. They are, wow, how come they are so exceptionally good in this area? You know, what are the studying, what are some of the characteristics that make them different? Okay, then you look at the other end of those who might be struggling, some disability. So these are certain things that educational psychologists would look at. So perhaps, you know, when you think about, oh, I want to study psychology, is this one area? So we have looked at clinical psychologists, counselors, educational psychologists. Now let's move on. Let's move on to social psychologists. What do they do? What do they study? They focus on how people behave in social settings. So they study the behavior. Okay, maybe they look at the attitudes of prejudice, discrimination. Why will this happen? You know, why do people have conform when there's social pressure? Why do people behave that way? Okay, how do people behave when there's an authority figure around? Social psychologist wants to understand the mental processes, the behavior of people in groups, how people behave in groups. Okay, so they investigate attitudes, prejudice, communication, interpersonal relationships, aggression, persuasion. Okay, why people say one thing but do another? Why do they seem to have a very good attitude towards studying, but when it comes to behavior, they seem to do the opposite of it? What is going on? All right, about relationships. How do people relate to each other? Romantic relationships. Okay, how does one behave in the presence of the opposite gender? Okay, why do people behave so aggressively? What are some of the factors that cause aggression? What makes a persuasive speech? Okay, what are persuasive Where does this persuasion come from? How come a whole group of people can persuade one to believe something? Okay, so this is what social psychologists studies and what they investigate. Now we look at forensic psychologists. This may interest maybe the youngsters nowadays. Perhaps you have watched CSI or The Mentalist, and then you say, wow, this is so cool. I get to like investigate and solve cases. I get to study the criminal's mind. I want to understand how they think. Now let's take a little closer what forensic psychologists do, okay, before you jump the gun to come in. Okay, first of all, they act as consultants in criminal cases. Okay, they perform child custody evaluations. They offer psychotherapy services to crime victims. So basically, it has something to do with the law situation. Okay, they want to understand how criminals think and also help them provide the psychotherapy services that they need. Or it is also for the crime victims. So it's not just the criminals that you're looking at, you are also looking at the victims. Right? And we also look at child custody evaluations in situations where the child needs to be put in custody. You look at if it is about the father and the mother, they make an evaluation to see what is best for the child. Okay, so other than being a consultant, they also work with child witnesses. Like if a child is called to stand for trial or a child is called to be a witness in a situation, would it be okay? So they will work with the child because they'll understand how such situations affect their thinking, their behavior, all right, their emotions. And they also evaluate competency to stand trial when they evaluate a person's behavior, the mental health, whether they are okay to go for this court case to stand trial. Okay, and they are also called to offer professional testimony in court. Okay, so they behave, their role is more on consultant rather than they go around like a detective and solve cases. Now let's look at one more. So we call this the industrial organizational psychologist. Sometimes we say IO psychologist. And their focus and study on human behavior is people's behavior at the workplace. They study workplace behavior. Like for example, how do you select the best employees for the particular job? So maybe it sounds a little bit like HR, but it's more than that. Okay, they want to see what is the best fit for the job. Okay, what type of job will fit best with what type of personality. And even on the job, they will look at, okay, this is the situation now. How do we help to increase the productivity of the work? Why is the motivation so low? What are some factors that are affecting the workers to perform better? So this is what the industrial organizational psychologists will look at. They also create assessments to screen candidates for specific job roles. Okay, they want to help choose the best employee for the job. Yeah, we know HR, send out job applications and they get people to come in and they do an interview. But the industrial organizational psychologists have certain knowledge and theories to help in this situation. So they help to make assessment, they create assessment to find the best fit. They also develop training programs for existing employers to increase knowledge, maximize efficiency, and minimize injury. So they see what the needs are in the workplace. Okay, what are the needs of the employees? What are some of the issues that they are facing? And then they would develop training programs to help. Okay, maybe to help their clients, okay, to help the employees to better understand themselves or how they manage stress or how do they communication at the workplace. So they develop training programs to help the company, to help the employees. So this is what industrial organizational psychologists do. Now we have seen all the different types of psychologists, and after listening to it, I just want to share with you, bear in mind that it's not limited, psychologists are not limited to just those that I've told you about. There's so many others. Okay, you have sports psychologists, animal psychologists, and the list goes on. And so I would encourage you, if you are interested to study psychology, perhaps you could do some research and investigate what other things psychologists, what other types of psychologists are out there, and where do they focus on, what do they focus studying, which part they study about humans. It can be very interesting. So today is just a little bit for you to know and be aware, and then go and research a little bit more to find out. So today I've talked about the 3 myths. Okay, the first one, psychology is just common sense. We have seen that perhaps what is common knowledge to people, or what is common sense that one person would behave in this situation, may not always be true. Okay, and psychology helps to investigate further, to test these common sense ideas to see whether it is true, and they provide evidence of such. So this is not true. It's a myth. Psychology is more than common sense. Next, psychology isn't real science. As we have seen earlier today, it is real science. Okay, it's a scientific method to answer questions. We have hypotheses. Okay, we can test it again. We can make prediction from our data. There's solid evidence. Okay, after doing the research, there are evidence to show. So it's tangible. Yes, we may think that, well, how are you going to understand emotions and thoughts? They are so subjective. Well, psychology has its way to study thoughts and emotions in a very scientific manner. So psychology is science. Okay, so it is science. Now, psychologists get paid to listen. From what we have heard just now, we know that psychologists get paid. That is true. But they are not just paid to only listen. They offer more than just listening. So it's not, oh, you come, you have a problem, sit here, I listen to you and I get paid. No, they involve so many more other skills and knowledge to help the person. So psychologists gets paid, yes, but more than just listening. They get paid to do more than listening. And in fact, there's so many types of psychologists, not just one type that sits down and listens. Right? So these are not, so this is what we have seen today. These 3 myths, we have busted them. So now you'll be wondering, why should I study psychology? You have heard what psychology is about. You have heard what it is not. You have also seen some of the possible career choices of psychology. Now, why should I study psychology? Perhaps the question you should ask yourself, why not? Why not study psychology? What are some things that you can benefit from it? Well, definitely you learn more about yourself and others. You learn about people. You learn about how they think, how they behave, why they feel this way and that. So you will learn more about yourself. Develop to be a better person, and you can understand and know people better. Basically, you become the expert of understanding people's behavior and thinking process. You also gain valuable research and analytical skills. Okay, so research skills, thinking, critical thinking, analytical thinking, these are all trained in psychology. And you become a better communicator. You learn how to convey thoughts and ideas better. You learn how to communicate better with different types of people because you understand the different types of people. You understand the way they think. You understand the personality differences. You understand the situation and why they behave that way. these information and knowledge should make you a better communicator. You learn also how to resolve conflict. Okay, you have better understanding about people. You understand why people behave certain ways, what makes them handle situations as such. You also learn strategies, how to resolve conflict. And, well, you have a whole list here. You will learn people skills, how to interact better, problem-solving skills, conceptualizing skills, communication skills, and generally you will be better prepared for different kind of careers. So when you study psychology, it's not just limited to studying psychology and become only a psychologist. The skill sets that you have learned in psychology opens a whole realm of choices and opportunities for you to use these skills. So you will be prepared for countless of careers. So what do you think after listening to this talk? Would you consider to study psychology? So that's all I have to share with you today. Thank you for listening. I hope it has benefited you, and I hope that it helps you to understand what psychology is all about. So I'll pass the time now to Erica. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lee. Okay, thank you, Ms. Lee, for the sharing. But really beneficial to the audience, and also we are getting to know more, understand about the psychologies, as there are many different types of psychology. All right, let me share this slide first. Okay. Okay, so before we go into the Q&A sections, I would like to request of you to scan the QR code here for the evaluation form. So your feedback is very important for us to improve in the upcoming webinars to present more better to everyone. Okay, so at the same time, if you have any questions, you can just leave a message in the Facebook Live video at the bottom, the comment. Okay, so you can just, if let's say you cannot scan the QR code now, you can just screenshot it and then scan it. All right. Okay. So yeah, obviously there's the questions I would like to ask. So I guess many students they are curious about is it same? Miss Lee, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah. So I would like to ask, is it psychologists and psychiatrists are the same?
That's a very good question. And I think this sometimes people get confused, you know, like psychologists, psychiatrists, what's the difference? And the main difference is psychiatrists, they are actually first and foremost trained as medical doctors. So they are medical doctors that specialize in psychiatry, in understanding human brains, how it works, and they understand human problems from the medical perspective. So they look at, let's say, depression. They understand that there are chemical imbalances. And so they first and foremost want to understand human behavior and from the medical perspective. And then they are also equipped with psychotherapy on how to manage and to help the client. But the main difference is psychiatrists, they are medically trained, and only they can distribute. They can subscribe medication. Yeah, only psychiatrists can actually write down and say, okay, you have to take this medication. Only they can do that because they are medical doctors. But for psychologists, let's narrow it down to clinical psychologists. They do not have the authority to give medication. They cannot dispense medication to the client. Okay, but they understand human problems. They understand humans' behavior, like let's say depression, they see it from the other factors, factors like maybe thinking thoughts, thinking patterns. There's something wrong with that, okay? Maybe it's the family, not enough support. So they don't look at it from the medical point of view, not the biological point of view, but they look at it as the environment and also the person. So clinical psychologist looks at that. Yeah. And the difference between that, since we're talking about this, we have counselors as well. Counselors also look at human problems and they want to help, but they look from the developmental perspective. So it's a bit more on the prevention. Clinical psychologists, we look at it as, oh, the problems are a bit more severe, but we look at all the other human, environmental, psychosocial factors to explain the problem. But psychiatrists, they look at it from medical point of view, biological, chemical imbalances. So that's the main difference between a psychologist and a psychiatrist.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Lee, for the clarifications. And then I would like to ask the second question. Since psychologists cannot be a psychiatrist, then may I know what graduates from degree in psychology, what kind of job they can do?
Well, graduates of psychology, you can do a lot of things actually. I think if the question is like, where do you want to use the skill and knowledge that you have? But let's just keep it more simple. The normal jobs that graduates would do in Malaysia, a lot of them go out to be counselors. They get extra training. They do their masters to focus on certain areas. But other than counselors, some of them also go into the industrial organizational psychology. Some of them help with career development. There are also those who cross over, they went to business and they do really well. They somehow, the knowledge that they have learned in psychology, they apply it there. Of course, we have a group of people that they're very enthusiastic, so they further their studies in clinical psychology. You have others that branch out, child psychology, they focus on children, they do special education. Some of them, they like to be teachers, so they focus on educational psychology. So it's actually quite wide. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Lee. Yeah, and there's a question. What do I need to do if I want to be able to conduct therapy with clients?
Okay, when you say therapy, I am assuming that you're interested in counseling and clinical psychology. And if you really want to pursue that path, you need to further your studies to at least a master's level, or a race specific course that provides you the specific training, because there's so many different types of therapy. So you have to be well trained first before you do it. So if you do a basic psychology degree that is too general, you need to further equip yourself with the skills to provide such therapy for clients.
I see. Thank you, Ms. Lee. Last week the SPM result has released, and most of the SPM school leaver, they are wondering, like, if they are not from science stream, they are art stream student, no take biology subject before, whether they can join in the psychology.
Yes, you can. You are most welcome to come join us in psychology. Okay, so psychology in Utah is a social science. So whether you are from the science background or the arts background, you can learn and join. It's not an issue. But perhaps some of the concerns, that students may have coming from an art background. Just now you said that it has some science. You're a bit worried. Okay, but in Utah psychology degree, we do have perhaps one or two subjects that might be a bit more challenging if you don't have a science background, but students pick it up and they learn well. So I don't think it's a problem. But just to let you know, we have physiopsychology, which may seem to be a bit more biology, might have some of those biology studies there. But that is just a small part of it. Psychology is more than just physiopsychology. So those coming from arts, you don't have to be scared just because of one subject. And also, yes, we are at this topic. We do have some mathematics subject, as in you still learn some mathematics. We have statistics that you will also learn, because this is one of the very important areas in doing research. You need to know some statistics. So yes, there's some math involved, there's some science involved, okay, but if you're from arts background, this doesn't stop you. You can come in, and there are many students from art background that came in to psychology in Utah, and they have done well. So do not be afraid. You're most welcome to join.
Thank you, Miss Lee. Yeah, there's a last question actually from mine lah. Because they were wondering, like, is it any gesture we do, then a psychologist can know what are we thinking?
Ooh. Do we read minds, you mean? Well, first of all, psychologists do not read minds. I don't like look at you, Erica, now, and then I can tell what you're thinking. But we read body language. Okay, but even body language, it could be, I can't say it's universal, right? Because we have to put it in context. And because psychology is a study of understanding people's behavior, what we can see, and also the thinking, and over time, a lot of data has been compiled to understand, okay, most likely this person would behave and think in this way if that happens. So we put it in context, and we can sort of make some prediction, some guesses. So in that sense, yeah, we do read body language. Certain gestures in situations, we can guess, oh, this person must be feeling very nervous because of this, and that. Okay, because very observant people, yes, they can also come to similar conclusions. But if you want to say, can I read your mind? No, we can't read your mind. We are not psychic. We don't have that special mental energy. Bing, and then you I understand what you're saying. Yeah, so I hope that helps.
Thank you, Miss Lee. So may I know, is there any questions from the audience? If you have, you may just leave the message in the in the comment. So all right, due to the limited time, we might stop the webinar. But before we end, let me to introduce some of the introductions from Utah. All right. Okay, before that, just to let you know, for all the SPM school leaver, if you are interested in psychology and SPM with 5 credits, which is a grade C, then you can go for psychology. But 5C is included mathematics, science, and also pass in English. Okay, so for SPM leaver, you can go for 1 year in foundation in science, in art, then you will proceed to degree another 3 years. So the Bachelor of Social Science Honors Psychology is offered in Kamba campus. All right. So for information, Utah has 2 campuses. Utah main campus is in Kamba. The award-winning Kamba campus was built on a 1,300 acre pieces of land, which is donated by Para State government. Okay, and the Sungai Long campus located in the Bandar Sungai Long, and the main township in Kajang Selangor is a state-of-the-art purpose-built campus, right? So for information, these are the area of study from Utah. We do offer accounting, business and economics, actuarial science, mathematics and process management, agriculture and food science, arts and social science and education, Chinese study, creative industry and design, engineering, IT, life and physical sciences, and also medicine and health sciences. Okay, and for information, we do offer more than 120 of programs, included foundations and degree, and we do have over 69,000 of alumni. Okay, and the data show that we do have 95% to 97% of graduates are after 6 months of graduates within 6 months are able to get a job. Okay, and besides that, we do have 70 plus student clubs and society for you to join. Okay, so if you have any questions, please visit our website study.edu.my or study.edu.my/cn, and you can reach us in our Facebook page, Utah for You, and you may reach us in WeChat as well, UtahNet. And these are the hotline. You may call us or WhatsApp us for more the inquiry. And the most traditional way is email. You can email to inquiry@allianceutah.edu.my. All right. So that's it for today. And also there's an upcoming webinars on tomorrow. Alumni is our alumni sharings. One of our alumni sharings on the SCCA pathway. He will talk about how his pathway to getting a SCCA. So if you are interested to join the program, the webinar, you may scan the QR code here, or you may just screenshot the slide first and then register later. Okay, so that's all for today. Thank you everyone for joining us. Goodbye.